Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on climate and the blue economy. As Katie said, this is the second of 5 seminars in the NOAA Science Report seminar series. The next seminar in this series will be held on March 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Kristen Chappell. I am the OAR representative to the NOAA Research and Development Enterprise Committee, which is a cross-line office committee of the This committee is responsible for the development of the NOAA Science Report with input from contributors across NOAA. The sponsors for this seminar series include the NOAA Research and Development Enterprise Committee and the NOAA Central Library. And I want to thank the NOAA library staff, especially Katie Rowley, for their valuable assistance. The NOAA Science Report is an annual report that highlights NOAA's scientific accomplishments for the year and reflects NOAA's research priorities. The 2021 NOAA Science Report will be released shortly on the NOAA Science Council website, so please stay tuned. The Science Report spans the entire range of NOAA's mission, with more than 60 stories featured in the 2021 report. These stories represent the accomplishments of NOAA employees as well as NOAA partners. Today, we welcome 5 speakers whose work features climate and the blue economy. The full bios for these speakers today can be found on the website description of today's webinar, so I am just going to give their names and affiliations in order to save more time for their presentations. Our speakers today are Dr. Michael Palecki, who is the Science Project Manager of the U.S. Climate Reference Network in NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information. Then we have Dr. Craig Stow, who is a research scientist at the NOAA Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory. Next, we have Nate Herold, who is a physical scientist at the NOAA Office for Coastal Management. Then we have Jennifer Zhuang, who is an economist and contractor with the NOAA's Performance Risks and Social Science Office. And lastly, we will have Dr. Chris Lauer, who is also an economist at NOAA's Performance Risk and Social Science Office. Each of the 5 speakers will be given an 8-minute presentation, and then we will have a question and answer session after all of the speakers are done. So with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Michael Palecki to kick off our presentations. Michael, if you're ready.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about a project that was over for quite a while now. It was released in May of 2021, which is our 30-year normals. There we go. And as we think about normals, we think about averages of weather observations over time. 30 years has been chosen by the World Meteorological Organization as the standard period. What we use normals for are to put today's weather in context. Essentially, we can create anomaly maps. We can look at whether today is above or below normal. And so the Weather Service uses this, and of course, broadcast meteorology uses it extensively. But we also have the actual state of the climate that one would most commonly expect for a given day or time. And that's used a lot by various economic sectors, energy, agriculture, construction, et cetera, that give us that information for periods beyond the point at which we have a forecast that's viable. So typically, you've seen these maps all through your lives, climate maps. They are changing over time, though. This is April mean temperature and April normals, and I just want to put in a plug here for our gridded normals product that's being released this March and the first week of March, which is the follow-up to the station-based normals that went into creating these. The thing about normals is they're not so normal. They're not simple averages. If one had complete data and excellent coverage and essentially no changes in the station or its environment, then normal would be an average. But what is happening usually is we have a bunch of citizen scientists out there taking measurements, either with cooperative observer stations that the National Weather Service runs, or COCO rods, or some other kind of grouping that really changes over time. So these observations have to be quality controlled, and then the temperatures have to be corrected for any non-climatic effects of changes in stations. And then precipitation is often missing at times, and we have to fill that in using surrounding stations. So normals are a corrected form of an average. It's not exactly an average. And one of the big things about new normals is people want to compare it to the previous normals. 1991, 2020 is the new and current normal. 1981 and 2010 is the previous normal. And you can see from these two maps that it's getting wetter in the eastern parts of the US and drier in the Southwest. And that kind of might jibe with what you've heard in watching weather disasters over the time period. Also notice that temperature, of course, is warming from one period to the next. Remember, there's 20 years overlapping between these periods. So it's pretty large change between the 1980s and the 2010s that we're seeing here. The 1980s are dropping off, the 2010s are coming on. And so that effect alone is what we're seeing in terms of these annual changes. But notice in the middle part of the country, in the north central, that temperature hasn't changed a lot. And that's due to atmospheric circulation variations and other vagaries that occur at a decadal timescale. Notice that the differences in normals can vary by month, so just want to make sure that it's not all one big ubiquitous picture. It really does change with atmospheric circulation, with the seasons, with other feedbacks like snow and so forth. And you can see that in the southeast, especially in this particular case, you have plenty of warming in October, then it's actually cooler in the November timeframe and then warmer again in December. December being the warmest or the largest temperature increase month. Now, the other thing about normals are people think it's all about climate change. Well, normals themselves, like I said, are kind of utilitarian tools that we use for giving a baseline for today's weather and climate, and also for understanding climate for making business decisions. But as you can see over time, as the 30-year periods go across the screen here, indeed, it's been getting wetter the last 3 30-year periods since 1971. And you can see also, especially here in this diagram, that temperature is greatly increasing since 1971. This is really the fingerprint of climate change that you can see in the normals, and it's really an excellent example of something that normals weren't meant to be used for, but they're really good at showing climate change over the United States. Then finally, we did have a really successful rollout, because not every NOAA project ends up on the front page of the New York Times. So that was a really a feather in our cap that we gathered that much attention. So in conclusion, I showed you temperature and precipitation, but you can make normals for any kind of measurement. And in fact, we have many more variables that we use that for, an in situ surface kind of observation. But you can do this with remotely sensed data, with modeled data, other types of data. The baseline period gets updated every 10 years in a standard way, but we can use a different baseline or a different starting point for normals as long as they're consistently held across a set. For instance, we also produce a 15-year normal from 2006 to 2020 for people who need climate information that's closer to the current climate. And then they're okay with there being a little more variation in the results because of it going only 15 years. The product enters the thoughts of the public almost daily, because every TV broadcast that I see of the weather compares yesterday's weather to a climate normal, and it's intensely used by economic sectors. So this is a really great product produced by NOAA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That was a great presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Craig Snow.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share some of what we're learning up here in the Great Lakes region. I'm going to speak to a 30-year temperature record as well. This one is specific to the southern part of Lake Michigan. And as I go through the presentation, I will indicate to you why we think this long-term temperature record through the water column of Lake Michigan reveals the heartbeat of Lake Michigan. So the map on the right depicts the location of our temperature mooring. You can see it's sort of in the middle, southern middle part of Lake Michigan. That's just to the northeast of Chicago or southeast of Milwaukee for perspective. This mooring with the thermistor string on it was first deployed in 1990. You can see a depiction of that over to the left, and there's a schematic of what this looks like in between the map and the picture. And an important point I'll highlight right now is there's a float at the surface and also a float in the middle. That'll become important in a subsequent slide. And I'll also just mention that we have several other comparable thermistor strings, one in Lake Superior where you see the big dot, and one in Lake Huron, but we don't have temperature records for nearly as long at either of those locations. So this is now a depiction of where we have data over time from 1990 through 2020. You can see the actual location of the thermistors differed a little bit over time. And at the bottom, I've indicated what instruments we actually had deployed. The vendors and the technology have changed some over time, and we've kept up with that. And you can see that there have been a few changes both in the vendors as well as the sensor location over time. I mentioned the float in the middle. If you look over to 2015, the float at the surface gave out during that deployment, but we do have data that was good from the middle float on down, so it saved us in that instance. These data are year-round, and they have been hourly since 1995. Up to that point, temperature was logged every 3 hours. From those data, then we can make an interpolated plot that looks something like this. What I've indicated here, there are horizontal red lines, and we're going to take a slice at each of those red lines for a continuous or nearly continuous record of temperature at depth over this period of time. You can see, though, it depicts the warming in the summer and the stratification that occurs and the breakdown of stratification each year. I'll complement this with surface data derived from satellites. And here's that picture of each of those slices and the temperature fluctuations over this 30-year period. If you look at the very top, the satellite-derived data, this looks very much as you might expect. It's a sort of a sine wave. It goes up and down on an annual basis in a very smooth sort of way. But as you go deeper into the water column, 30 meters, 60 meters, and on down, the signal gets distorted. And I guess what we thought was kind of interesting is by the time you get down to the 60, 75 meter range, this begins to look like what we thought was a heartbeat pattern. Now, I don't know if there are any trained medical professionals watching this. They may not feel that looks much like a heartbeat, but we thought that was quite an intriguing discovery. I'm going to hone in on this in the next slide. And now what I've done is I'm comparing the surface plot with the plot at a depth of 110 meters. Again, I pointed out that it looked to us like a heartbeat. And the other thing I want to highlight then is I'm going to take where you see the gradient area, the data from approximately 2009 showing a complete cycle, and that's highlighted then over to the right. And these temporally dense temperature data then allow us to pinpoint very precisely when we see overturn that permeates all the way down to the 110 meter depth. That's the red circle there. Then you see the temperature drops. Then we see the reverse stratification that occurs throughout the winter and mixing that begins. That's the bluish or purple circle by the M. And then we can see stratification set up again as into the spring. So we can see those very precisely with these data. And we've looked at how these have changed through time and found some very interesting things. And we've explored these data with a number of different approaches. We've used basic linear regression, we've used descent slope estimators, we've used seasonal trend decomposition technique, and this is a nonlinear technique, and we've used hybrid approaches, which employ elements of all of the things I've listed here. And the depiction to the left then is one of these hybrid approaches, where we now show at differing depths from the top to bottom. Here they're labeled A through G. Those are different depths in the water column. And what you just see is a depiction then of the January, February, March, etc. Cycle through all of those years. And we've mapped that then on the plot to the lower right, or the middle right, I guess. And areas where we see warming temperatures are indicated in red, and areas where we see declining temperatures show up as blue, and the degree of warming or cooling is relative to how strong the color is. And there are also dots on these to indicate strong signal to noise ratio. So what you can see from this is we see pretty strong warming at the surface and throughout much of the water column, not all the way down to the 140 meter depth. And one thing I want to point out that's kind of interesting is if you go down to the 30 meter depth and over to September, October, that area, you see what appears to be a cooling. And if we were to only be measuring this at that depth and that time, we might conclude that in fact the water in the lake is cooling. What this represents is a delayed mixing that's occurring because the summer stratification period is longer than it used to be. So where we used to get warm water mixing down in August or September, that's not occurring anymore, and that shows up as a net cooling at those depths and temperature, at those depths and times of the year.
You have 1 minute left.
So we have these 30 years of subsurface observations. We think this is the longest continuous high frequency temperature mooring in the world. We see that the deep waters are warming, but not nearly as much as the surface waters. We can see clear warming in the winter months down to about 110 meters. We see that fall overturn is becoming delayed by upwards of 6 weeks. And one thing I thought was interesting, that the lag between the surface overturn and when that's felt at the deep layers is very, very long. It's on the order of weeks. I had kind of a textbook picture in my mind that occurred almost instantaneously, but there's quite a lag there. And the implications for productivity and water quality and biodiversity are yet to be explored. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. I think that's pretty cool that it looks like a heartbeat. So our next speaker is Nate Herold. Please take it away, Nate.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you today about how we're utilizing artificial intelligence in some of the mapping work that we do within OCM, and highlight for you a few examples of how those products are being used in management applications. The work that we use AI for is done under the umbrella of our Coastal Change Analysis Program, or CCAP. CCAP is an authoritative source for land cover data within the US, designated by the FGDC as a national geospatial data asset. Our data sets are included within the NLCD, or the National Land Cover, and they feed a wide range of applications. Just to highlight one that's very climate related, the CCAP data that we produce is the source for all of the coastal wetland information that's included in the US greenhouse gas inventory. Now, we've been producing these products for a few decades now, and we've utilized a wide range of techniques and technology. Through most of our history, the products that we have produced have been based on Landsat imagery at a 30-meter resolution. Right now, we're planning to release a 2021 update to our last data set, which was the 2016. So you can kind of see that 5-year period where we update those products. We're planning to do that and release those products next year. But we really envision that 2021 update might be the last of those 30-meter products that we develop. And that's because we've really seen kind of the writing on the wall, and we're looking to transition this product line away from these more regional resolution products to a higher resolution version of those same data sets, one that can both support a wider range of applications because of that detail, but that can also be used at a more site-specific or local level. Now, we've been producing high-resolution data for some time. It isn't necessarily a new thing for us, but it has been pretty cost prohibitive for us in the past in terms of the amount of area where we could produce those products. And that's changed more recently through time. And that's been because of the availability of low cost or freely available imagery and other ancillary data like LiDAR, as well as improvements in terms of technology, both cloud-based or distributed processing, and improvements in more advanced deep learning AI classifiers, which is really what I'm focusing in on. Right now, our target for these higher resolution products is to produce a 2021 data set, same date as those 30-meter products for continuity purposes, and to do that by 2025. And that's so that we can start operationally updating those products come 2025. Now, if you're not familiar with what land cover might be, you're seeing an example of that here on the right-hand side of the screen, compared to a color infrared image of the same area on the left-hand side of the screen. And this is an example from a pilot area that we've had in New Hanover County in North Carolina. And really what you can see here is a really good level of detail associated with these products. And what you get from these that the imagery doesn't provide is kind of the quantification of those land cover types that exist in those specific locations. So it tells you how much impervious cover there is, how much tree canopy exists, how much grasslands and bare lands exist. And then you can utilize this information in conjunction with other data such as flood zones or sea level rise, inundation zones, to drive a lot more analysis about what features are at risk or where wetlands may be impacted. Here's another example showing a salt marsh environment in Massachusetts, and really just kind of take a second here. You can kind of see just the vast amounts of detail that you can see in that marsh platform. You can see a lot of the pans, the pools, the tidal creeks that exist within those products. And this is just not detail that you can see clearly in those 30-meter products that we've produced in the past that were really designed to function a lot more at the regional level. Now, what we've been doing much more recently is trying to improve the mapping outputs that we can produce and really drive what we can do with initial automated results to get to those results faster and with less effort. Typically, that's through less training data. We use a UNet architecture of neural nets to drive that classification. And we typically utilize some of our finished products from one geography, transfer those products and the training that we can pull from those to apply to the new classifier that we produce in the next geography. And really what we're doing then is trying to improve kind of the most automated pieces of what we're doing in producing those products. You know, one of the things I like to tell folks is that while these tools have made our job much easier and really improved our efficiency, they've also made it much easier for other people to produce low quality or mediocre quality land cover products. You know, what we typically sell ourselves on is the fact that there's a very big difference between producing a product with impressive technology and producing an impressive product. And we tend to move towards the latter, understanding that technology helps us achieve those goals. We also work pretty extensively with private industry. Those companies that have invested a lot of time and intellectual capital into standing up these systems and quite frankly have a much larger capacity than we typically do in producing these products. Some of the other products that we also produce under our CCAP umbrella is similar to our high resolution products. We've produced a few areas where we go into even more detail with some salt marsh habitat mapping. Utilizes similar methodologies Typically, these are based on partner need. We've only really produced these products in New Hampshire and Rhode Island to date. And what I'm going to do for the last couple of slides that I have here is focus in on this New Hampshire example and really talk a little bit about how the state has utilized both those high-resolution CCAP land cover products for the context around these marsh environments, as well as this detailed salt marsh habitat mapping data, and fed those products into an analysis of marsh resilience. We actually
have 1 minute left.
Okay, perfect. We actually do this analysis at 2 scales right now, kind of at the national level, utilizing our 30-meter regional CCAP products, and then at the local level, like what I'm talking about here in New Hampshire, where we can use these higher resolution data sets to drive an analysis of how resilient salt marshes can be to the effects and impacts of sea level rise. Now, what the state of New Hampshire has done with those various data sets is really use that information to help inform their statewide salt marsh comprehensive plan. And what they've done is taken those products and been able to analyze all of the various metrics in those salt marsh resilience studies, and then come up with marsh by marsh recommendations of what some of the best management strategies should be, given kind of the pros and cons or strengths and weaknesses of each of those various marshes. And so with that, I'll stop and point out that if you're interested in obtaining some of this data and taking a closer look at what the results of our products and our use of AI can do, I highly recommend you visit our Digital Coast website and read a little bit more or download them yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Wow, what a difference 30 to 1 meters makes. Next, we have Jennifer Zhuang, whose presentation will focus on the marine economy. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Zhuang. I'm an economist with the Performance Risks and Social Science Office. Today, I'll give you an overview of the Marine Economy Satellite Account project and some recent updates. And NOAA collaborated with the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is also called BEA, including the marine economy into the national account systems since 2017. The national account systems are comprehensive measurements of the economic activities of the whole U.S. So on June 8th last year, NOAA and BEA released the first official U.S. marine economy satellite account. Like the real satellite account, real satellites orbiting Earth, satellite accounts orbit BEA's core national accounts statistics and take closer look at a segment of the economy, such as the art and culture, healthcare, and also the marine-related activities. By far, the marine economy satellite account is the most accurate and comprehensive view of the marine activities and industries in the U.S. It's also consistent with the most advanced international practices by Portugal, Ireland, and OECD. It's also comparable with the core statistics like GDP released by BEA too. The first step in development of MESA is to define the geographic and industry scope. The ocean-dependent activities are the ones that either takes place in the marine environment, like marine transportation, or by necessity located in proximity to coasts, like vacation rental properties at beach. We also include the activities that are either use essential inputs from ocean, like seafood processing, or produces goods and services predominantly for use in the marine environment, like navigational devices, no matter how far inland these manufacturers are. Due to the complexity of U.S. coastline, the marine environment consists of a dynamic of water bodies, including the EEZs of Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic oceans, the Gulf of Mexico, Great Lakes, estuaries and embayments like Chesapeake Bay, Puget Sounds, and some inland waters leading to the international shipping terminals like Portland, Oregon. All these activities are organized into 10 ocean sectors: fisheries and other bioproducts, research and education, professional and business services, dredging, restoration and other construction, national defense and public administration, offshore oil and gas, transportation, shipbuilding, tourism and recreation, and power generation. NISA uses BEA's industry input-output model, which simulates the interdependence of more than 5,000 goods and services. Among these, we identified about 1,000 categories that are either entirely or partially related on marine resources. One innovative part of this measurement is that the partially in-scope activities we have developed coefficients, also called partials, to measure these activities' marine portions. Dozens of data sources are used to generate these coefficients, including government statistics from Coastal Guards, Department of Defense, DOT, Transportation, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census, and Energy Information Administration, as well as private sector data like National Marine Manufacturers Association on the use of different recreational boats, and Baker Hughes on the number of oil rigs, and so on. There are several major improvements last year. Besides the BEA's industry accounts base model benchmark, the official account also included the inflation-adjusted time series data, which are also called $10 values data, in addition to the nominal values that the prototype account reports. We also included additional indexes to help us distinguish the changes in both prices and production quantities. Also, improvements were made to refine coefficients used to reflect a more accurate portion of the marine industries identified in the previous prototype account. And here are some examples. Census construction data was applied to expand the marine construction sector with more marine-related activities. The EIA data, the Energy Information Administration's data, was applied to refine the coastal utility sector to only include the power plants that use ocean waters for cooling water. And Department of Transportation's freight analysis framework data were applied to refine the warehousing industry to include only the international, to include both international and domestic trade activities along the coastal ports. Also, there are some new activities are identified to be marine related, or data are discovered to enable the computation of coefficients to reflect the right portion of industry activities focused on marine economy. Here are some examples. The National Center for Education Statistics was used to apply to the marine programs in universities and colleges to understand how much percentage of them are marine program related. And the International Energy Agency data was applied to add the R&D activities for renewable energy development into the marine research and education sector.
You have 1 minute left.
National Flood insurance product, the insurance program data were applied to include wind and flood insurance to the Great Lakes coastal counties. Yeah, here are some results of the data. We could see that from 2019, about 1.9% of the GDP are marine related, and compare with other industries in the country, you could say that it's larger than farming, data processing, internet publishing, and utility sector. And the distribution chart, you could say that tourism and recreation and national defense and public administration are the two largest contribution sectors. And also, this marine economy grew faster than the national economy in 2019 on average. Yes, this is an overview of the project right now. Here are some current progress. We are still making improvements on several aspects, like including more economic activities that related to the coastal resilience development. And also, we are going to bring the release schedule faster, develop the regional and states accounts, develop blue technology account, and also link MISA with the natural capital accounting and try to understand more about the people in the marine economy. Yeah, that's all for now. If you have more information, feel free to contact us through the email in the slide. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that very informative presentation. Our final speaker is Dr. Chris Lauer.
So yeah, I'm an economist with the Performance Risk and Social Science Office. Today I'm presenting a paper called Leveraging Risk Communication Science Across U.S. Federal Agencies. This paper was the result of an interagency collaboration. There were many co-authors from across the federal government who contributed to this effort. This included several NOAA co-authors. In addition to myself, there was Michael Smith, who currently works for NOAA Fisheries, and Monica Grasso, the NOAA chief economist. This paper was published in Nature Human Behavior, and a link to that paper is included on the final slides for those who wish to read it. So as I said, this project was a collaboration of social and behavioral scientists from a variety of federal agencies. And all of these scientists apply the principles of risk communication science across a wide variety of hazards. The co-authors on the paper were part of a working group associated with the Social and Behavioral Sciences team organized by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And while risk communication has been a priority in NOAA for a long time, the ongoing pandemic has made this topic a priority in many agencies across the federal government. And the goal of this work was to identify best practices for risk communication, identify challenges to implementing those best practices for federal agencies, and to articulate key research questions and gaps in our ability to translate the best science into practice. So the reason we study risk communication and why it's so important to federal agencies is because many of these agencies are responsible for managing and communicating about a variety of natural and man-made hazards. Understanding how people create and spread ideas about risks and hazards, and how communicators can shape those ideas, allow agencies to more effectively carry out their mission. So we developed this paper by having authors from each agency write up examples and case studies based on their own expertise and experience. These experiences were then synthesized, and common challenges and best practices were identified by the working group. Our goal was to provide practical guidance for practitioners and decision makers, allowing them to learn from cases across the government. We also hope to identify useful research questions that the broader scientific community would address that would, meet federal agency needs. So NOAA was a key contributor on this paper. As I said before, our agency has a significant stake in the science of risk communication. And we were able to draw extensively from some of the great work that has been done in our agency. So one example of this work is in 2016, the NOAA Social Science Committee published a set of best practices based on a survey of recent literature for risk communication, specifically focusing on natural hazards. The audience for this report was NOAA staff, such as forecasters, outreach coordinators, and other people responsible for communicating with the general public. And this report describes 7 key dimensions for effective risk communication. This report was followed up in 2019 by a guidance document and accompanying planning tools that can be applied to public-facing NOAA programs. And I've also included links to these documents in the final slide for people who wish to learn more. And I would really encourage people who who are interested to check out these really great resources. For the case study our agency submitted, we highlighted the National Weather Service's innovative impact-based decision support services program as an example of how we are implementing risk communication best practices. So a little bit about this program. It fosters relationships between local National Weather Service staff in the local weather forecast offices and key local, state, and federal officials who are referred to as core partners to ensure that these decision makers have the most accurate, reliable, trustworthy weather, water, and climate information. And a key goal of this program is building trust through deep relationships with important core partners. And the community partnerships, ongoing interactions, and tailored messaging that the IDSS program facilitates are an excellent example of how NOAA is implementing the best practices for risk communication. So I've highlighted the NOAA contribution to this paper, but other participating agencies also contributed case studies on a wide range of topics, from effective messaging about drug side effects to the needs of pet owners in evacuation planning. And from the guidance documents and case studies we collected from the various participating agencies, we were able to develop a unifying set of challenges and recommendations. So I'm going to cover the challenges first. These included working around the inherent uncertainty in many scientific findings, which make clear and accurate communication difficult. This is especially true for a public that does not necessarily talk about uncertainty in the same way that scientists and statisticians do. Another important challenge was contending with the circulation of misinformation and disinformation, especially in the age of social media. Third, agencies often struggled to align messaging with target population culture, beliefs, and values. And we lacked the know-how and resources to more effectively reach some of the target communities. We found that the federal government lacked a focal point for practitioners to get clear guidance, learn best practices, and connect with other people and resources. And finally, we found a limited capacity for problem-based research within many federal agencies, especially smaller agencies with limited research budgets. So our hope is that experts in the field of risk communication science will start working to address some of these problems. We also found a set of common best practices that cut across the experience of many different agencies. These practices are used by many NOAA programs and could be implemented more broadly in our agency and across the federal government to more effectively carry out our missions. These recommendations include the use of stories and visuals that focus on reasonable actions that can be taken to mitigate risk. Messages need to be tailored for the specific types of risk and uncertainty. Investing in target communities was another key action. Agencies should make an effort to understand the knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs of the target community. They should treat communication as an iterative process that integrates community feedback to improve messaging over time. And finally, we found that better results could be achieved by partnering with other local, state, and federal agencies. So this study highlighted that government agencies working in a variety of domains face challenges to communicate about risk effectively. Although the particular hazards can vary, there are effective strategies to improve our communication about these hazards. We provide a set of best practices that can be implemented based on the best available scientific evidence. We also provide guidance to researchers in the field of risk communication about what types of scientific advances will help federal agencies be more effective. As a next step, several members of this group are currently working on a follow-up paper focused on communicating scientific uncertainty. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I've also included on the final slide a link to our paper, as well as links to the NOAA reports and guidance documents that I mentioned for those who wish to learn more. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for that presentation on a very important subject. And thank you to all of our presenters for your great work and really informative talks. I'd now like to open it up to questions, and I'll turn it back over to Katie for our Q&A portion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kristen, and thank you to all our presenters. We did have some questions come in, so I will be asking them as they were presented. So this first one is for Michael. Is the increase in temperature since the early 1900s an increase in minimum temperature or maximum temperature?
In fact, both have increased, although maximum temperature has increased slightly more than minimum temperature. It depends really on what part of the US you're looking at. That's slightly different in different areas.
Got it. Thank you. And I'm just going to follow it up because I have this question in front of me, and it's also for you, Michael. You mentioned that a gridded product will be released this March. What implications will that have?
Well, we've taken all this station data for 15,000 precipitation stations, 7,600 temperature stations, and we've used a climatologically based interpolation procedure that accounts for, elevation and slope aspect, et cetera. And we've put it over a 4.5 degree grid across, 4.5 kilometer grid across the US. So we have a very high resolution product that's going to come out in terms of monthly temperature and precipitation normals. And later this year, we're really looking forward to having also a daily version of the same thing. So this will be helpful for people who do geospatial analysis of climate related situations. Yep.
Great, thank you. Okay, so our next question is for Jennifer, asking where can we access the report that you referenced regarding the blue economy financial information?
Yes, I just checked the link. I'm not sure if I'm sending the message to all of the group or just you. But yeah, you could search the Marine Economy satellite account, and the BA's webpage has all the information and data that I talked about. It also has reports and update the recent release summary. I'm going to chat the link again in the chat box so you can have it.
Great, I did put that in the chat for everyone to see, so hopefully everyone got the link.
Yeah.
Okay,
great.
and we got confirmation that everyone got the link. Awesome. Okay, so our next question is for Craig. You mentioned a paper. Would you be able to share that with everyone, what paper you were mentioning at the beginning of your presentation or possibly at the end of your presentation, Craig?
Sure. What would be I don't have a link handy that I can paste into the chat real quickly, but it's in Nature Communications, and those are all accessible papers. If you search under Lake Michigan or my name, it should pop up pretty quickly. It came out in about March of last year. Alternatively, if you email me, I can certainly send you a copy.
Wonderful. Also, if you are with NOAA, you should have no issue accessing Nature Communications. The library does have a subscription to that journal, but it would be under Craig's name from March 2020 or 2021, correct, Craig?
Yeah, approximately. It was about March of last year.
Okay, approximately. I'll just pop that in the chat so people have that.
And actually, there's no E on my last name. I see it in the chat.
I see that. Stow without the E. Thank you. Okay, we do have a question for our last speaker here, Nate. You mentioned that some projects are based on partner needs. How do partners get requests to your group, and how do you prioritize these?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that's sometimes very difficult for us to do. We put our priority on some of those more core products, the ones that we kind of produce everywhere and that we're trying to produce everywhere. So, the other kind of partner need-based products like the habitat mapping work that we've done, we fit in when and really if we can. And I probably said partner need, but a lot of times that really means kind of a cost share involved there as well.
Great, thanks, Nate. And we do have a question just come in for Chris. Does the paper dive into different needs for specific stakeholder groups that are often underserved?
It does a little bit. I think that's another area that needs some more research and needs some specific research. That's another area actually where NOAA has done a lot of work in the last year in response to the executive order that President Biden put out. And I don't know if those reports are publicly available yet, but there has been a lot of work internal to the agency on how we can work better with underserved communities. And so, yeah, I would say that this paper certainly references and mentions it, but doesn't take a deep dive by any means. I think that's definitely an area that could use more work.
Thanks, Chris. We did have a question just come in. So as everyone knows, you still have a little bit of time. We're a little bit before the hour. So if you have a question you're thinking of, please type that into the question panel and we'll get to it. Our next question is for Michael. What is the major, answer this as best you can, what is the major goal or direction of NOAA's climate research and development?
Oh, that is a broad question. We certainly want to meet the needs of the nation in terms of understanding weather and climate, especially with regards to hazards to humans and their environments and their economies. And this would go all the way from severe weather to climate change as different aspects. At the location where I am, the National Centers for Environmental Information, I say that we focus mainly on the gathering and archiving of the climate data that's used by scientists to address a lot of these issues. And we do some of that addressing ourselves in some of our own research that's driven by user requirements. So we try to address a wide variety of these issues. We create, for instance, $1 billion disasters collection of data that NOAA puts out there with regards to the largest of severe events that occur and affect the United States. We also eventually, all of our data is used by the people that are addressing the different spatial and temporal scales of climate change. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. We did have a question for Chris about sharing that link for the Impact-Based Decision Support Services website. So Chris, if you want to chat that to me, I can send that link out to everyone. There we go. It's on a weather.gov website. Here we go. Everyone should see that in the chat now. Thanks for that question. Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm just doing a quick look through what's come in. I think we can wrap it up a little bit early, give everyone back 3 minutes of their day. So I want to thank you all for attending today. As a reminder, if you want to pass this on to a colleague, we did record this and it'll be up on the library's YouTube channel. And if you stick around after you close this window, there will be a survey pop-up. We'd be happy in the library if you filled that out. We use this feedback to improve our seminars and to solicit some new ideas. And as a reminder, I don't know if, Kristen, do you want to mention the seminar upcoming?
Sure. Just as a reminder, the next seminar for the NOAA Science Report series will be held on March 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And sorry for that brief break. I was trying to grab that link. So if you would like to continue to be a part of this NOAA Science Report seminar series, specifically the next one is on reducing societal impacts from hazardous weather and other environmental phenomena on March 9th. That link is now in the chat and you can register for that here. Again, thank you everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful and safe rest of your Wednesday. Take care.